Good afternoon and welcome to the second session of Artist Talks at the Delhi Photo Festival. Thank you very much for being here. It's lovely to see such a large audience. And like I said yesterday evening, there's nothing more satisfying to the team who's put this festival together to be able to share our love of photography with so many people who obviously love photography. I guess that's why you're here. Thank you very much. The afternoon's program, you want to clap? Yeah, okay. Thank you. This afternoon's program, the Artist Talks, we have 4 of them. We start with Pablo Bartholomew, who I don't know if he said that he should not be introduced by anyone or he will do his own introductions.
I said I'll manage it, but you can go ahead because you know me from many, many years.
I know, but I'm too scared to. Maybe I'll say something wrong, so I'll leave it to you. But I will say this, the fact that I have known him for 35 odd years. Yeah. He'll be followed by Mahinderji, who will be introduced by Monica Tiwari, who I think I see here. Yeah. And then Nayoa Hatakiyama, who will be introduced by Vidur. And the last artist talk will be Shenshi, who will be introduced by Oshima. But that won't be the end of the program. We also have a book launch by Sam Harris. So we start off with Pablo, and he's been a friend, as far as I'm concerned, for 35 odd years, and a friend of the Photo Festival since the Photo Festival started in 2011. Pablo.
Thank you. So here I am. When Prashant called me middle of the year to ask me whether I'd try and do a talk and if I would talk about my ongoing project, I sort of thought about it for a day and then said, yes, why not? Because it's kind of problematic to show work in progress, but the reason I thought that I would do this is because so much of my work over the last, let's say, 5 to 8 years has been just working with the archive that people think I have nothing better to do or have done. So it's better to try and expose work which is going on. And the other reason he said is that maybe it can help some of the younger photographers also sort of deal with things that they're trying to do in the same way. So I don't know if there are any other colleagues, younger photographers, I'd be happy to talk to them. So just a bit of family propaganda, because many of you may not know about my father, my mother, who are both in the arts. My father died in 1985. My mother is still alive. She's in her late 80s. Had a stroke, so she's sort of, let's say, half alive. If any of those of you who knew her and how volatile and all over the place she was, she's a poor shadow now. So this is us. I have a younger brother. He wasn't born then. This is my mother reading Thought. Thought was a literary and critical magazine devoted to politics, arts, out of Delhi. Both my parents wrote for that. This is my father. He walked from Burma at the age of about 14, 15, when the Second World War happened and the Japanese were coming in. And then I was made in New Delhi, in fact, in modern school, the school that later I went to because he taught there, and they have staff housing. Then again, my mother is half Punjabi, half Bengali. The Bengal side is West Bengal. The Punjab side is West Pakistan, now Punjab. Now West Punjab, now Pakistan. So I have family all over the place, and I think decade after my father died, which was in the late 90s, that I started to sort of wonder and wanted to figure out what's happening, where I come from, all those sort of things. So if you lay a map over this, you sort of see I have family in Pakistan still, then of course in New Delhi. I have a lot of Punjabi relatives, and then Bengali relatives in Calcutta, in Cooch Behar, and in Bangladesh in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, and of course Dhaka. So that's from my mother's side, and my father's side is Burma. And as I discovered, and as you will discover with me again, the sort of number of cities that I have family. So in 2009, this is the email that I got. I don't know if people at the back can read it, but I'm sure the front row wallas can. And it's from a woman called Hazel McKay, somebody who I did not know at all. And she says, now I'm 70 years old, living in Thailand with my second son. I'm from Davoi, which the old name for that town was Tavoy. In Burma, everything got changed. Yes, I was also born in Davoi, Burma, in 1939. My mother, Do A Yin, had two elder sisters, Do La Kin and Do Pyon Kin, and an elder brother called Sunny. As I remember, my mother's eldest sister, Do La Kin, was married to Major, at that time, William Harris Bartholomew in Dubai. That I think they got wrong, but I hope you might have known the rest of it from your father, who we know by the name of Ko Thin Pe, or Brother Dicky. So this is where I first learnt that my father had a Burmese name. He was extremely quiet about his origins. Though when we were growing up, and it was like summer time when we were being put to sleep, both my parents, for some reason, recounted their journeys. My mother from Pakistan at partition, and my father. But you know, those memories you hardly ever keep. They never really repeated those stories, and as you're growing up, you're really not interested in your parents' stories, however horrible their journeys may have been, but you're too into your own self, which I was, that it just goes on to say, I have to confess that I personally never see him, as I am 13 years younger than him, but I stayed with his parents for over 5 years during my high school time, and my aunt and a husband as a retired chief Burma railway engineer in Canyon Quarter, Davai, Burma. They told me that I had a cousin brother in India. Many years passed by, life changed, time flies fast. One thing in my heart wake up again to talk to my son to search for my cousin brother in India. So basically, here's this lady who has this yearning to try and connect. And later I found out it's the son who's written this, because she doesn't have the capabilities of writing, but you can see her. Of the two attachments, she's the one on the left-hand side of the right-hand picture, and on the right is her sister. So I started getting these emails with more images and the family tree. So that's Hazel on the left and Dolly on the right. That's Hazel, I guess, about 5 years ago, while she was with her son in Thailand. And then my cousin James, there were obviously phone conversations. I was kind of a bit suspicious because I said, I'm supposed to have Burmese origin, and these emails are coming from Thailand. The phone number's a Thai phone number. What's going on? So I did call in to sort of check it out, and James said to me that I run a golf course here in Western Thailand in the Kanchanaburi district, which is better known for the film The Bridge Over the River Kwai. I was a bit shy in trying to ask him whether he worked there or he managed it or he owned it. I just felt, I didn't know them enough. But then he sent me a link for the Anglo-Burmese Society website, and he said, there are records that you can find. And in the front page, in the home page, they have a little database, which is like a teaser. And then when you become a member, you can go through the full database. But for me, because the family name is B, so in their teaser database that they had, I found my grandfather, grandmother, and my father, the record, and basically it's an evacuee register. And then later on I traced that to the British Library in London, where there are two registers. The first one deals with, as it says, Europeans, Anglo-Burmese, Anglo-Indian, and other non-Indian evacuees. So these were compiled, and the second register is has the Indian listing. So just a few pages down with a name starting with B, the family name, there you were, W.H. and Master R, Mr. and Mrs. So that was kind of nice. I was able to photograph it as a record, and this is what the pages look like. I did find there are a lot of Bartholomews, but I don't know if they're related or not. So, as I've been going through my father's archive from about 2006, I found these pictures, and later on when I took them to Burma, I was told who's who. But I was somehow under the impression that these photographs had been taken in India. And I figured that maybe they were taken when my grandfather and grandmother, because I recall seeing some family albums of the wedding of my parents, that they may have come and at that time, and maybe one of the other sisters may have also come. And as I was putting this PowerPoint together today, I had this sort of eerie feeling that actually this is not my father. It's probably my grandfather, and looks, because the age between both of them is quite similar, and there could not be that this is my father. So, which means that these pictures are probably taken in Burma. He got them, the negatives, and kept them with his. There are no records, so I don't know, but this is what my current thinking as per a few hours ago is. And then one started to find little, as I went through my father's things, there was a visiting card which just said W.H. Bartholomew, and the three alphabets on the right, W.H.K., sort of, wanted to figure out. I tried to look up railway data, all of that. It didn't make sense until I figured that it was, like you have the Padma Shri here, you have something called Wana Cho Thin, which is WKH, which is a civilian award which is given. So I guess he got it, and that's where those things are. This is again back in Davoy, then Tavoy. Again, another picture sent by email. That's my father on the front row holding a solar topi. And above him is his mother, and next to him is the father, and then there are the aunts. And I guess, I don't know who the young girls are, but they're probably the cousins of one of them. That was given to me as a small image when I went to Burma. And this is the family tree that was sent. So my great-grandmother married a British electrical engineer, and they had 5 children, and my grandmother is the oldest, who married, here they say major, but he was really in the railways, and during the Second World War, all engineers were, sucked up into the army. So I guess they gave him a rank, and that's how the family thinks that he was in the army, which he was, but only for a short period. Hazel is extremely right. That's the lady who contacted me. She's the eldest of Do E Yin. And as I found out, for years I've tried to figure out, what my cocktail may have been. And I did then find out that I have relatives who have Scottish, Irish, Chinese blood. But for me, a bit of a horror story was that at a very late age, I sort of realized, I said, shit, I'm Anglo-Burmese. Here, I always, all my Anglo-Indian friends, we tease the shit out of them when they're in school, even in college, we sometimes are a bit disparaging. And here I am, I have Anglo blood. Well, what do? You have to reconcile with what you have to reconcile. And here I am at a very advanced age, understanding my origin. This is the family tree only from my grandmother's time. I have no idea of my grandfather, William Harris, and who he was, where he came from in terms of his other, family. Another picture with some of the cousins. And I'm told that Hazel and her sisters were great beauties. You can see them, and they did fashion shows and beauty pageants. And this was all up in a mining town in the north called Namtu. And then I also got images which were slightly more recently of often with these kind of captions and circles about who was who. And this is somewhere in Scotland, my aunt's daughter's getting married. And again, another party, and then with, again, caption, legend, stuff like that started coming. So it took me a while to want to actually meet. There was a yearning, but there was also distrust. And in 2012, in May, I went to Australia for a photo festival, and on my way back, I had sort of decided by then that I would break journey and meet James and Hazel, but before that, there was another cousin in Sydney. So James sent me his numbers. I called him up, and so this is actually the first physical contact that I have with somebody of my Burmese family.
One day I was using Google to look for something important for my job, and then my mom came down to me and said, "What are you doing?" I say, "Google." And she would like to know what Google can do. I say, "I can look for many things, whatever we want." She said, "Then look for Richard Bartholomew, her long lost brother." So I searched it. I saw biography of your father, and I saw that he was dead. He was gone. But maybe I didn't mention about his pass away. And then I tried to talk to my mom and look for possible phone numbers of himself, of his father, whatever. I got your phone number and email.
So when I came to visit you, were you surprised that I came and visited you?
I wasn't surprised because I felt like when you call me from Sydney somewhere and ask Uncle Tommy's phone number, I felt like you will be seriously doing things to look for your relatives. So one day we will meet. And also my mom would like to plan for us to go and meet you over there to give whatever information we can. Because I always feel that our grandmothers who parted away and never united, like your grandma's son, your father, who never came back, was only some years younger than my grandmother. So my grandmother felt with your father like a younger brother than a nephew. So she had been always waiting for your daddy's return. So I felt, and all the relatives here in Burma felt, that we need to do something to be united or to be connected. So the modern technology help us.
So as you can see, I have a great debt to Uncle Google. Maybe I should give them money. So when I met James, it's a bit. I was trying to find this image, but it was shot on a phone, and I couldn't locate it. James, when I arrived in Bangkok, I checked into a hotel, and James said, "I'm going to come at about 8 o'clock in the morning and pick you up and take you to the golf course." So I was a bit petrified, but he arrived at 6, knocked on my door, said, "Hey, I'm here, let's go." So I said, "Give me 15 minutes to throw things into my bag." And so as I came down, I said to James, "James, just stand in front of your vehicle with your driver. This is the first image that I want to make." Well, what I wanted to do is take a picture of him, the driver, with the vehicle number, and I quickly emailed it out to a few friends saying, "Listen, if something happens to me, these are the guys, this is the vehicle." And I started Google. There's one of the programs that actually maps your journey. So there was this sort of sense of fear. I don't know why, but But James turned out to be a nice guy. You just heard him. And the golf course did happen to be for real. So as we drove back, he stopped before we actually got to his course in a village and said, "We have some distant relatives here, and I'd like you to meet them." And so we met this old lady, and then he borrowed my iPad and said, "This is the picture from the Scottish lineup from the wedding reception or whatever," and said, "Aren't there physical similarities?" Then he pulled up the picture of my father as a young boy and said, "Aren't there physical similarities?" So I kept on saying, "Uh-huh. And so this is me with this group of distant relatives. And then when we arrived into the golf course, he said, you have a cousin who's visiting also. So I said, okay, great, fantastic. And so that's my cousin Juliet and her husband on a golf cart. And that's how I exactly met them when I first drove in. They were, moving around in a golf course. So this is the golf course. To get to the golf course, you have to cross a river, and there's like a little ferry that takes the car across. It's very pretty and nice. So I did ask James then, I said, you work here, you manage it, what do you do? So he said, well, I lease it. And my clients are Koreans, old retired Koreans who play golf from morning to night. So that's his business. So this is around the River Kwai area. They have these sort of war monuments. So there's James, Juliet, and her husband. And they have a little museum. There's a private museum which addresses the war and things like that. That's the plaque. That's the rail track with the bridge. I don't know if any of you have actually been. It's supposedly quite a big tourist attraction. And then at railway stations you have these photographs and illustrations about the POWs and what the Japanese did to them. And that's the train. Of course, now it's all diesel. It was quite treacherous. I put some of these images, just to sort of show how on the side of there's water one side and there's a hill or a mountain on the other, and it can get very steep. That's when you actually come into Kwai. There's a peace monument that's been built. And it used to be called the Death Railway because there were thousands of prisoners of war, including from India, of Indian origin, that died building this for the Japanese. In 2013, James and me finally were able to find time to get to Burma. He had an agenda that I didn't know about, but he explained to me that he'd also hadn't returned to Burma for 25 years. So it seemed like he was looking for his family, his father's side, and I was looking at his family. And so it was like a joint search, and you'll learn more about it as we go. This is just downtown Rangoon. The money that used to be used during the Second World War, all Japanese printed. Me trying on a lungi, and I start to visit the relatives with him. So this is Uncle Peter's house and my cousins, and as you can see, they live quite humbly. One of the things I discovered that I'm actually the family, the so-called Burmese side is of Mon ethnicity, which is M-O-N, and for most part, we are Burmese to the outside world. But within Burma, unless you are from the valley, the Irrawaddy Valley, and you are Bamar, you're really not Burmese. So on the ID cards of the national ID cards, you have either Mon Scottish written, Mon Irish written, and that's the distinction that the government makes, which means that eventually you can't rise, you don't get a shot. It's a bit like a caste system, but you can't rise up, you don't get a shot at the top slots. And then, of course, at every house that we went, photos emerged. This is Auntie Chocho on the right, drinking tea. And then we started this sort of pilgrimage. That's another younger nephew, another portrait, more photographs. That's Auntie Hazel in the foreground. And then we had Auntie A, the lady in the middle. And she was another girl who was taken in by my grandfather and put through high school. And in Burma, it's common that if there is a well-to-do family, they take in cousins, nieces to help them. Though Auntie A is not related, but I think there is a friendship within the families, and she got taken in and put through school. So she came with us on this journey, and she gets very emotional when she sees the residence where my grandfather used to live as when he was chief engineer Burma Railways in Rangoon. Auntie A lives right at the edge of the Burmese-Thai border, the southernmost point called Victoria Point. It has a Burmese name, but I don't know it. And this was in downtown Rangoon. This was where the railway headquarters was. It's now run down. Recently, when I went back, it's been taken over by a Chinese business magnate. It's going to be made into a big hotel complex. And that was the residence that my grandfather supposedly lived in. But again, this is concrete. That was a wooden structure. And when I went back a year ago, all of this had been cleared. The red building still stood because that's heritage. And there's going to be a hotel developed. That Shwedagon Pagoda, one of the things I started to do was go out and visit the great sites. I mean, Shwedagon is always such a great delight to go and visit. I also tried to go and see my father's school, which is St. Paul's. Tried to actually get information, see if there were any records, but difficult again. As I traversed through the city, going through the churches to see if there were some records. And then, of course, visiting Bahadur Shah Zafar's mausoleum. For those of you who don't know, Bahadur Shah Zafar was exiled to Burma, like the Burmese king was exiled to India, to Ratnagiri. So, on a Friday especially, they have chanting, singing, and it's quite magical there. And then they have community food. Talking about food, here we are. It was Auntie Hazel's birthday, and we end up in what they call a chetty restaurant, which is basically Chettiars used to be in Burma. They used to control all the gold, the jewels. There's actually a street which still has these Chettiar wooden doors. And of course, a lot of it has been bought by Burmese Chinese, but the gem trade still goes on. I remember when I first went to Burma in 1983, there were many more of the traders, the Chettiar traders. And then we start going through from our humble cousins to richer ones, and it becomes like a huge group activity. Uncle Peter's there, Aunt Hazel is there, Aunt Cho is there. They're all sisters, cousins. And then we go to another relative's house and take another picture, and then we go and do this big, huge group shot. So you can see that I do have dozens, and more will emerge. Beyond just the meeting and the courtesies, I started to get into some of the family activities. And here was a younger nephew who was going to go into monkhood. And there you can go into monkhood for like a week. It's just a ritual that you do. And it was Auntie Cho's husband also was going to. So you go and get your head shaved, and then you wear the sacred clothing. You're given some doctrine. Then you beg for alms, and then you sleep in these very austere rooms. This is where James revealed his part of his family, and he wanted to reconnect. His uncle was for a short while a prime minister of Burma, U Ba Sui, and then the military put him under house arrest. So he went to see U Ba Sui's family and the widow, which is here. And that's Aunt Hazel talking to Mrs. U Ba Sui. And then we went to another relative's house, humbler. And what I started to notice is how photographs are used specifically in all Burmese homes. I think they do it in other countries too, Vietnam and things like that, where you have this stack of images on top. And it sort of fascinated me because every time you can read the whole family history right there. The graduation picture, the service image, the marriage, stuff like that. And another group photograph. And this family had a little workshop, and the guy made gold ornaments and jewelry, stuff like that, right in their house. Went up to Mandalay. This is how we traveled. So it was like a band of gypsies, Auntie A, Auntie Hazel, James, and my cousin. We got into this minivan and headed out. It was also the time of the water festival, which is a bit like Holi. And water festival is there between southwestern China, Vietnam, Thailand, Burma. But it's kind of boring because, unlike any color, they just hold these hoses and hose everybody down, as you can see in the background. And then build these huge platforms out of which they're spraying, and cars are just passing endlessly. But it's for 5 days. So, and this was the critical time that we were moving. So the water festival started in Rangoon, we caught it in Mandalay, and then we finished with Mandalay, went up to Moulmein, it was still there. And in Mandalay, another round of aunts. That's Aunt Dolly. If you remember the picture right in the beginning of Hazel and another girl, that's what now she looks like in her later years. And I'd made a video. There was from the family tree or some aunt of mine who lived in Edinburgh, but the addresses were all jumbled up. Later on I realized it was 3 addresses altogether. And when I was in England, I used friends to contact a private detective that they knew and see if I could find her. And they did look up the birth death records and or marriage and find her address. And they sent me this by email with a message saying, please don't call. There was a phone number there. Later on, I learned that you're not really supposed to call, but if the sort of correct procedure is that you write. And if the other side wants to forget the past or doesn't want to have anything to do with it, then they remain silent. But in this case, Auntie Margaret did respond, and she said, I'd love to see you. And so with my friend who helped me find her, we both flew up. I remember borrowing a camera from Olivia and Philip, who may be here in the audience, and a mic and a tripod, and went to interview her. Go.
We went for the train, and the train broke down, and we just decided then to walk to India, and there was another family with us, and we all, left a lot of our things, and the only thing we ever decided to take was Mum says, to take our kilts. And so we wrapped all that up, and of course we started to walk with this other family. And it took us a month to get to India. And on the way we had a lot of, trouble, like, we had to go through the jungle. And Mom was always saying, she was a bit worried about elephants, how a lot of bamboos were there, and we started to go on, and we came across a Nagar village, and this is a tribe, in
The Nagas.
And we slept there for one night, and Mum was very worried because they had hunters, and she didn't sleep at all. She kept awake, and then we went to get some water, and we found a body lying in the water, so we had to decide not to drink the water. So we had some rice, which Mom had cooked, and we had that. And I think that was all, was the rice. And then we went on, and the family who was with us, they got cholera, dysentery and cholera and all that. So we couldn't, stay with them to look after, especially the mother. And so Mom says, made her comfortable, and we walked on. And then we walked quite a long way, and I remember there was monsoon, it rained so heavily. And of course, Flora and myself, we were young, and we were very tired. So Mom took our bundles, and she, carried it for us. And I think we lost our shoes too. Or no, we didn't lose our shoes. We carried it to keep it, clean. And when we walked quite a long way, and then we arrived at in India, Assam, where the tea planters were.
Right.
And I met my cousin. She was going the other way, back the way. She being a nurse, and she was going to help some people, with a crowd of medical, and she gave us, some things to eat, and I remember having condensed milk, and it was full of ants. But my sister and myself were so hungry, so we just put our fingers in, and started to eat, not the ants, but just the milk. And then we arrived in Assam. The tea planters had made shelter for us and gave us food. And I remember eating corned beef. Oh, I thought it was luxury, and even bread and butter. And anyway, we contacted Dad. He was in Calcutta, and he says that he would meet us in Calcutta. And we took the train down, to Calcutta, and we saw him there. And we stayed a few nights with him, and then he says, you better go up to Murray. So we went way up to Murray, with the army, and stayed in Murray till, we came to Britain.
So this is sort of, the interconnected histories of India, Burma, the war. I'm going to now, because of lack of time, skip and go to the next part, because there's more family and more family and more family, and it could be that it gets a bit boring. So a lot of this is still, hasn't really, I've got a lot of video. It's not all static like the two clips that you saw. There's a lot stuff which is moving and things like that. But earlier this year, I was in April, I was in Burma again. And the last years I've been thinking, what should I do? I should try and engage with the country differently. And I thought that I would put together a kind of workshop which dealt with old photographs, family albums, and then do a show. So the Goethe Institute, the British Council, and a private gallery in Yangon or Rangoon called Data all collaborated, and this is the project that I put together using, of course, my grandfather's photo as a plug. The three in the foreground were the main participants. We had many more that came and went. This was over a 2-week period, weekends, where we would bring material, look at it. And during the week, we had a kind of outreach program where we went and met people and tried to find material. So the participants brought in their stuff. We sort of looked at it, tried to catalog it, edit it. This is from the participant of Indian origin, Momo. And as you can see, he's there right in the center from the top, second row from the top. His great-grandfather, who worked in the railways. Again, family, cousins, just passport pictures, but when put together, they're kind of interesting. His father was a wrestler / boxer amateur, and there you can see. And then we also had stuff like letters, and this is quite funny, this letter, where it's written, well, it's not really funny, it's very sad, but it's about after 64, when a lot of Indians were kicked out or chose to leave Burma, and they were shipped back. And they arrived in then Madras, Chennai. That's where the Burma Bazaar in Chennai comes from, is that they were resettled there, given shops and all, but many of them were shunted out to refugee camps. And the account is kind of, sad and funny, where this person writes about the food, the conditions in the ship, the conditions in the refugee camp. So we had, different layerings of things. And then this is one of the Burmese participants, and he brought this lovely images of his mother, hand painted, and then we helped him edit it. And then there was an Anglo-Burmese girl, Jane, who brought her family stuff. And this is the way then we presented it in this rather lovely gallery that Matt runs. These were Armenian women. They're a group of 4 sisters, and we met only 2 and got their material, and then they came to the exhibition, so I photographed them with their material, with their photos in front. And that's from their albums. And that is, the lady is one of the princesses from Thibault's family. And from her archive we got images. This is the grave of Thibault and his wife in the Queen in Ratnagiri. It's in the middle of nowhere. It must have been in the middle of nowhere, but then there was development and these terrible government buildings came about. That's Tutu, one of the princesses, in a very advanced age. She died a few years ago. And that's Tutu with her family. So they are actually integrated into India. The family name is Pawar, so Maharashtrian. And so it's sort of, the Burmese king Thibault becomes a Maratha in some way. Just some more shots of the show. And one of the things I did was send out this photograph to a military expert, and he kind of decoded the uniform, and then we had it up there, with all the descriptions of what it meant, whether it was casual wear. It wasn't obviously, uniform that you wore when you were on duty in the field. So that's basically the journey for the moment. I'm back in Burma day after to continue. The elections are gonna be coming up. November 8th is polling. So I'm not going in as a journalist. In fact, I was told not to go in as a journalist, because once they have you as a journalist, then getting in again is more difficult. But I still want to be around and see what I can find and do, possibly maybe with my family as they go towards the voting area. We'll see. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. I think we have time to take 2-3 questions if there are any.
I found some relatives late in life that I didn't know in Buenos Aires, and it was very strange because relatives should be a closeness, and yet they were complete strangers. Can you talk about that disconnect?
Well, I think I would bond with more of them much closer. There's a language barrier. Unfortunately, many of them can't speak English at all. Some of them speak it very poorly. So I think communication is, beyond the politeness. You really need the communication to go deeper. All my life, one of my big projects has been photographing the Indian community outside. And I was in Portugal earlier this month for 3 months, photographing the Goan people and people from Daman and Diu in Portugal. And I met this young man whose father was Portuguese. He was in the Portuguese army in Goa. He was born in Goa after his mother had 5 miscarriages in Angola and other places. And his father died when he was age 5. His mother died when he was about 12. And he met his Portuguese family only recently. And he's dark Goan boy. And his Portuguese family is white, blue-eyed, blonde. And I wish I could play that clip because he says it so eloquently that when he went to meet them, their gaze on him and the way he describes it. And I think sometimes that's what makes the separation. And then he said, we'll build on it and see where it goes. So it's a process, I guess, that you go on. That is if there is interest. Well, he's a PhD student in psychology, psychiatry, I forget which one, and he said there's a lot of mental health issues in that end of my father's family, so he said maybe I can do something for them. And they also looked at him as somebody who may be able to do something. So, sometimes there's that bridge that can also happen.
One more question, if anyone has one.
Hi. During the talk of Aunt Margaret, she mentions a place called Murray. Where is that, Murray?
Murray is in Pakistan. It's the place where they brew beer. That's what it's famous for. It's a hill town from the little knowledge that I have. But there may be other people in the audience who may have Pakistani connections in Murray. So Murray it's easily, now you can find anything.
It's a hill station just beyond Rawalpindi, actually.
You have relatives there?
Well, my dad was from Lahore, so they used to go up there during the summer holidays, I believe.
And drink beer?
Hmm?
And drink beer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's supposed to be a brand name, right?
Yeah, Murray
okay.
beer.
Pablo, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Bengal side is West Bengal, the Punjab side is West Pakistan, now Punjab, now West Punjab, now Pakistan. So I have family all over the place, and I think decade after my father died, which was in the late 90s, that I started to sort of wonder and wanted to figure out what's happening, where I come from, all those sort of things. So if you lay a map over this, you sort of see I have family in Pakistan still. Then, of course, in New Delhi, I have a lot of Punjabi relatives. And then Bengali relatives in Calcutta, in Cooch Behar, and in Bangladesh, in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, and of course Dhaka. So That's from my mother's side, and my father's side is Burma.
He will be followed by Mahendraji, who will be introduced by Monica Tiwari, who I think I see here, yeah? And then Nayoa Hatakiyama, who will be introduced by Vidur. And the last artist talk will be Shenshi, who will be introduced by Oshima. But that won't be the end of the program. We also have a book launch by Sam Harris. So we start off with Pablo, and he's been a friend, as far as I'm concerned, for 35 odd years, and a friend of the Photo Festival since the Photo Festival started in 2011. Pablo.
Thank you. So here I am. When Prashant called me middle of the year to ask me whether I'd try and do a talk, and if I would talk about my ongoing project, I sort of thought about it for a day and then said, yes, why not? Because it's kind of problematic to show work in progress, but
Good afternoon and welcome to the second session of Artist Talks at the Delhi Photo Festival. Thank you very much for being here. It's lovely to see such a large audience. And like I said yesterday evening, there's nothing more satisfying to the team who's put this festival together to be able to share our love of photography with so many people who obviously love photography. I guess that's why you're here. Thank you very much. The afternoon's program, you want to clap? Yeah, okay. Thank you. This afternoon's program, the Artist Talks, we have 4 of them. We start with Pablo Bartholomew, who I don't know if he said that he should not be introduced by anyone or he will do his own introductions.
I said I'll manage it, but you can go ahead because you know me from many, many years.
I know, but I'm too scared to. Maybe I'll say something wrong, so I'll leave it to you. But I will say this, the fact that I have known him for 35 odd years. Yeah.
Had a stroke, so she's sort of, let's say, half alive. If any of those of you who knew her and how volatile and all over the place she was, she's a poor shadow now. So this is us. I have a younger brother. He wasn't born then. This is my mother reading Thought. Thought was a literary and critical magazine devoted to politics, arts, out of Delhi. Both my parents wrote for that. This is my father. He walked from Burma at the age of about 14, 15, when the Second World War happened and the Japanese were coming in. And then I was made in New Delhi. In fact, in modern school, the school that later I went to because he taught there, and they have staff housing. Then again, my mother is half Punjabi, half Bengali. The reason I thought that I would do this is because so much of my work over the last, let's say, 5 to 8 years has been just working with the archive, that people think I have nothing better to do or have done. So it's better to try and expose work which is going on. And the other reason he said is that maybe it can help some of the younger photographers also sort of deal with things that they're trying to do in the same way. So I don't know if there are any other colleagues, younger photographers. I'd be happy to talk to them. So just a bit of family propaganda, because many of you may not know about my father, my mother, who are both in the arts. My father died in 1985. My mother is still alive. She's in her late 80s.